It's interesting to note how Nibley and Lehi in the desert on page 27 found that Nephi is also attested as Nehi, N-E-H-I, and Nehri, N-E-H-R-I, in the Old World, who were famous Egyptian noblemen. Nephi, N-F-Y, was the name of an Egyptian captain. Now, since the Book of Mormon insists on the PH, Nephi is closer to Nipi, N-I-H-P-I, the original name of the god Pa-Nepi, which may even have been Nephi. The point is, the name Nephi, as Laman and Lemuel and Lehi and Sariah and Sam, have now been attested linguistically. The most astonishing, consistent background to the Book of Mormon is the ancient Near Eastern background, where linguistically, geographically, archaeologically, politically, religiously, historically, botanically, in every major scientific sense that's been explored so far, the Book of Mormon fits the bill. Nibley also records in chapter 4 of Lehi in the desert the act of building an altar. This is exactly the ordinary artificial mark of a Semitic sanctuary. Hebrew as well as Arabic is the sacrificial pillar, cairn, or rude altar upon which sacrifices are presented to the god. In Arabia we find no proper altar, but in its place a rude pillar or heap of stones besides which the victim is slain. It was at this same altar of stones that Lehi and his family did offer sacrifice and burnt offerings, and they gave thanks unto the God of Israel upon the safe return of their sons from the dangerous return journey to Jerusalem. When Raswan reports that a baby camel was brought up to be sacrificed in honor of the safe return of Fuaz, we cannot help thinking of such things before the tent of Lehi on the safe return of his sons. This is what the Arabs call a Dabihat al-Kasab, a sacrifice to celebrate the successful return of warriors, hunters, and raiders to the camp. This sacrifice, writes Jowson, is always in honor of an ancestor, and Nephi twice mentions the tribal ancestor Israel in his brief account. The Bedouin lives under the constant impression of a higher force that surrounds him. St. Nilus, in the oldest known eyewitness accounts of life among the Arabs of the Tai, says, "They sacrifice on altars of crude stones piled together." That Lehi's was such an altar would follow not only after the ancient law demanding uncut stones, Exodus 20:25, but also from the Book of Mormon expression, an altar of stones. Nibley also noted that the daughters of Ishmael did mourn exceedingly when Ishmael died and when he was buried. We are reminded that among the desert Arabs, mourning rites are a monopoly of the women. He says that in Lehi in the Desert, page 79. His footnote number 68 on page 144 is also instructive. Taufik Kanan says, unwritten laws affecting the Arab women in Palestine. In funeral processions, women may not mix with men. When the burial is over, the women assemble alone. In visiting the tomb, they always go alone. And another source, Burkhardt, notes on the Bedouins and Wahhabis, at the moment of a man's death, his wives, daughters, and female relations unite in cries of lamentation. Interestingly, in the Lachish letters, we find parallels of the mind, the struggles, the sorrows, and the feelings of ancient Judah in the last days of the kingdom. In the book of Nephi, family loyalties are split along political lines, and it's a conflicting situation. If the situation of Uriah in the Lachish letters parallels Jeremiah, it even more parallels Lehi when we learn from the Lachish letters of a warning from the prophet to one of his friends who is apparently in the same danger as he himself is. Compare Lehi and sending the kids back to get Ishmael. Ishmael was also in trouble. It is a prophet fleeing from his home and his friends, a prophet wanted by the military authorities. It's because they accuse Lehi of being a foolish and visionary man. Going by the imaginations of his heart is what the brothers accuse him of in 1 Nephi 2:11. They make fun of their father for being Pikeah. That's the Lachish letters word for a visionary man. the Hapikeah, a seer. He is an open-eyed seer. Again, strictly an authentic touch. When Lehi ran across the valley of Lemuel, he recorded these sayings. Nephi recorded Lehi as saying, "When my father saw that the waters of the river emptied into the fountain of the Red Sea, he spake unto Laman, saying, O that thou mightst be like unto this river, continually running into the fountain of all righteousness. And he also spake to Lemuel, O that thou mightst be like unto this valley, firm and steadfast and immovable, in keeping the commandments of the Lord." 1 Nephi 2, 9 and 10. No subject has been more intensely studied over a greater number of years than that of the primitive Semitic poetry. And nowhere can one find a more perfect illustration of the points that are now agreed upon as to the nature and the form of the original article than in this brief account of Nephi's. This is a perfect Quellenlieder, as Goldheiser noted about the desert poems. That is, these are songs composed to fresh water. The ancient Arabs used to intone these poems after having refreshed and washed themselves in some fountain of running water discovered in the course of a long journeying. Ibn Qutayba, in a famous work on Arabic poetry, quoted a great desert poet Abu Sakr as saying that nothing on earth brings verses so readily to mind as the sight of running water and wild places. This applies not only to springs, but to all running water. The Arabs, upon reaching the al-Hayt, hailed it with a song of praise of the continuous and flowing rain, whose bounty filled the bed of the wadi, flowing along between sand and stream course. Just so, Lehi holds up as the most admirable of examples this river continually running. For to the people of the desert, there is no more miraculous and lovely thing on earth than continually running water. And Lehi captures this saj. This saj is a short exhortation or injunction, spoken in solemnity and with great fervor, sort of a chant. Lehi's words to his sons take this form of a short, solemn, rhythmical appeal. The consummation of the poetic art was to have two verses perfectly parallel in form and content, and that is precisely what we see Lehi doing here. As Nephi recounts the episode in his record, it must have been very impressive to him to be able to invoke this type of poetry for his sons. According to Richter, the best possible example of the primitive Arabic qasidah, the name given to the oldest actual poetry of the desert, is furnished by those old poems in which one's beloved is compared to a land in which abundant streams flow down, with rushing and swirling, so that the water overflows every evening continually. Here the continually flowing water is compared to the person addressed, as in Lehi's song to Laman. The original qasidah was built around the beseeching motif, not necessarily erotic, but dealing rather with the praise of virtue in general. Ibn Qutayba even claims that the introductory love theme was merely a device to gain the attention of male listeners and was not at all the real stuff of the poem. The poet's attention is arrested by some impressive natural phenomenon, usually running water. The forms of the desert poetry are songs inspired by the sight of water gushing from a spring or running down through a valley. They are addressed to one or usually two traveling companions. They praise the beauty and the excellence of the scene, calling it to the attention of the hearer as an object lesson. The hearer is urged to be like the thing that he is beholding. The poems are recited extempore, on the spot, and with great feeling. They are very short, each couplet being a complete poem in itself, and one verse must be followed by its brother, making a perfectly matched pair. Here we have beyond all doubt all the elements of a situation in which no Westerner in 1830 had the remotest conception. Lehi stands before us as something of a poet, as well as a great prophet and leader, and that is as it should be. It's often been said that there is no real poetry in the Book of Mormon. Well, no real English poetry, of course, but then there's no Italian or Russian poetry either, because Lehi didn't compose in those languages. This poem is another beautiful Arabic touch of an authentic desert heritage, on their journey through the Arabian desert.